Every mammal built to survive extreme heat or extreme cold solved it the same way evolution usually does: hair. More of it, less of it, thicker, finer. Wolves have fur built for snow. Camels have fur built for desert sun. Even chimpanzees, the animal you're most closely related to, are covered head to toe. You are the exception to a rule that applies to almost every other warm-blooded land animal on Earth. That fact alone should be strange enough to stop you for a second. Losing a fur coat in the middle of an ice age, on a planet that's killed off plenty of hairless mammals before, is not the kind of trait evolution usually keeps around. So something had to make it worth the trade. The leading explanation belongs to biological anthropologist Nina Jablonski, and it starts with a problem you've actually felt yourself. Overheating. A body covered in thick fur has one real option for dumping heat fast: pant, like a dog, which is slow and gets harder the moment you're also trying to run. Somewhere around 1 million years ago, an early ancestor of yours found a better option: sweat. Not the way you might picture it. Humans carry somewhere between 2 and 4 million sweat glands, spread almost everywhere on the body, releasing thin, watery sweat directly onto bare skin where it can evaporate freely. Fur doesn't help that process. Fur traps it. So gradually the fur had to go. This wasn't cosmetic. Losing the fur, gaining the sweat glands, let early humans do something almost no other large mammal on the savanna could sustain: move fast in full sun for hours long after anything wrapped in fur had to stop and find shade. Several researchers connect this directly to the eventual size of the human brain, an organ that runs hot, and that a hairless, efficiently cooled body could afford to feed and protect in a way a furred one couldn't. But naked skin is a trade, not a pure upgrade. What you gain in cooling, you lose the moment the sun goes down, or the moment you're somewhere the sun barely reaches at all. A fur coat is climate control that never needs charging, working exactly as well at 2 in the morning as it does at noon. Give that up, and you've solved one problem by creating a much bigger one. For most of the day and most of the world's climates, you're now a large, slow-growing, thin-skinned animal with no built-in defense against cold, sun, or a thorn bush, standing in an ice age that was actively hostile to anything shaped like you. So at some point, you replaced what you'd lost. Evolution doesn't grow fur back easily once it's gone that thoroughly. Instead, your ancestors built a version they could put on and take off. Here's where the story usually told about this gets flattened into something simpler than it really is. In 2003, a team of geneticists had an unusual idea. Instead of searching for clothing itself, which almost never survives more than a few thousand years, look at a parasite that depends entirely on it. Body lice, the kind that live in fabric, not hair, can't survive more than about a day away from clothing. They can't grip bare skin the way head lice grip hair. At some point in the past, they split off from head lice into a distinct population, adapted to a habitat that hadn't existed before: worn fabric. That 2003 study put the split somewhere between 30,000 and 114,000 years ago. Then, in 2010, a University of Florida team led by David Reed and Melissa Tupps reran the analysis with a different statistical model and got a meaningfully different answer. The real split, they argued, happened at least 83,000 years ago, and quite possibly as far back as 170,000. That's the number you'll see quoted almost everywhere now, usually presented as a single settled fact. That's not quite right. It's the newer end of a range that has already shifted by tens of thousands of years as the methods improved once, and it could shift again. It's worth sitting with how strange this method actually is. An entire timeline for one of humanity's oldest technologies, reconstructed almost entirely from the genetics of an insect that lives in your laundry. There's no clothing itself in the fossil record from this deep. Natural fibers and hides rot away almost immediately on a geological timescale. Everything before around 40,000 years ago, when the first-eyed needles start showing up at sites across Eurasia, is careful inference, not a surviving artifact you could hold. That's not a weakness in the science so much as an honest description of what studying something this old actually looks like. What that early clothing looked like was almost certainly closer to a wrapped, draped hide than anything sewn. Real evidence of tailoring, eyed needles, pierced awls, the tools of actually fitting a garment to a body, doesn't show up until tens of thousands of years later, clustered around the coldest stretches of the last ice age, when a loosely wrapped hide alone stopped being enough to survive a Siberian or Arctic winter. And once clothing existed at all, it seems to have quickly become more than a replacement fur coat. Archaeologists like Ian Gilligan have argued that choosing what to wear required something genuinely new for a mind to do. Picturing a future version of yourself, cold later, and acting now to prevent it. The same kind of forward planning you use every time you check tomorrow's forecast before picking an outfit tonight. Put the order together, and it matters more than any single date inside it. First, a body that gave up its fur roughly 1 million years ago to solve a heat problem. Then an enormous stretch of time, tens of thousands of years at minimum, spent exposed, adaptable, and genuinely vulnerable in a way almost no land mammal your size has ever had to manage. And only after that gap, a replacement good enough that a parasite evolved to move in and never leave. You're not wearing clothes tonight because humans have simply always worn clothes. You're wearing them because your ancestors spent an enormous stretch of their existence with nothing at all between their skin and the weather, and clothing is the fur coat you were never born with, built by hand instead of grown, put on every morning instead of shed once a year, replaced instead of regrown when it wears out. The next time you grab a jacket without thinking twice about it, that instinct isn't modern convenience. It's roughly 1 million years of your body's own memory, still being answered the same way it always has. Not by growing something back, but by making something new.